Hey, I'm Randy, and you're watching The Cheap Audio Man. Here at The Cheap Audio Man, we talk about high-value hi-fi home theater and headphone equipment. And today, we're going to talk about the most overhyped products in hi-fi, maybe. So sit down, grab a cup of coffee. Let's talk about some overhyped products. So this video is not necessarily about things that I don't think are good and they're overhyped. Maybe things that are oversaturated, but I asked my patrons what they thought was the most oversaturated, overhyped products out there. And I'm going to react to what they wrote. I may agree, I may disagree, but the first one comes from Taylor Willis. I was going to say Bose. I was also going to say Bose. There were some common themes across the comments, so I kind of picked the ones that were mentioned the most often. Bose is an easy target for audiophiles. However, I don't think what Bose did can be dismissed. Because what Bose did is they basically took the console stereo, like our grandparents used to have, everybody had it. You had a radio, you had a turntable, you had one piece of furniture, and they shrunk it down and they put it in everybody's house. Even my parents have one of those little Bose radios. I think there's a CD player in it as well. And you can also not dismiss Bose's role in multi-channel home theater. It made it easy. It made it acceptable with the Bose Cubes, the Acoustimass. I still have a set of the Bose Acoustimass, and it still works over 20 years. Now, if you're getting into frequency response, of course. I don't think the goal was to ever have a linear frequency response, something that audiophiles would like. You also can't dismiss their role in noise-canceling headphones. So while I do think Bose may not be the right choice for me when it comes to a speaker, what they did for the industry is bring people in. I would argue that Bose is probably responsible for more high-end audio enthusiasts, audiophiles even, than probably any other brand that has ever existed in the space. So while I think maybe they're not great, I think as a company they've done more for the industry than anybody else. All right, Buff, one of my boys from Patreon. At the risk of being flamed, lossless audio. There is sound science behind psychoacoustic compression. Take this test from NPR as I have to see if you can really tell the difference on your system. I've actually done that and I've taken that test. I've actually mentioned that in other videos. I'll put it in the description and you can try it out for yourself. To be clear, there are rare people with a golden ear that can tell the difference, but they are very rare. I took this little test and I was not 100% right all of the time. I also, before the channel ever started, I was playing around with Amazon HD Music, and I was comparing it directly to Spotify. The test was doomed to fail from the very beginning because I was having to switch headphones, change apps, and things like that. So being able to quickly A/B things on the same headphones was nearly impossible. When I really leaned in, I thought I could hear a bit of a difference between Amazon HD and Spotify. Now there's fundamental problems with that A/B test because, well, sometimes I think certain streaming services actually put a little bit of their own little magic sauce on the music anyway. But the proof is in the pudding, and I think everyone should click on that link and go take the test for themselves and see if they can hear a difference, because it's not just 320 kilobits versus lossless. I think there's a 120 kilobit track in there too. Pretty low resolution compared to lossless audio. Personally, I listen to Amazon HD and Tidal the most. That's just what I do. I like Tidal's music discovery tool. I think they have very good suggestions when it comes to the music that I like. But I think Buff has a huge point here. I think the need for lossless audio is probably not as significant as most people would think. However, I think the industry is going in that direction, and Spotify is king. I think other people are trying to differentiate themselves to get some of that market share away from Spotify, but if you've noticed, they still haven't gone fully lossless, because they probably don't need to. It probably has zero impact on their bottom line. So why, as a company, would you spend a whole bunch of money to go lossless when the people that care about lossless audio are infinitesimal compared to their total customer base. But I still listen to lossless music. And I think everybody that's watching this video should go check out that link and see if they can hear any difference on their own systems. To be fair, on higher end, super clear systems, it's easier to hear a difference, in my experience. Put on your headphones that have the most clarity, the most detail retrieval, and go take that test. See if you can get it right. So Trevor has a whole list of stuff. Overpriced for performance. Name, Martin Logan, KEF LS50/Meta, ELAC, certain models, B6 treble, bloat bass, Riga, high-end cables, Audio-Technica headphones. Whoa. I'll start with the one that I have the most experience with, and that's the KEF LS50. I watched YouTube before I ever thought about starting a channel, and that was one of the speakers that was on my list. And I eventually got that speaker. I found a very nice pair of used KEF LS50s, which there's always KEF LS50s on the used market. That should have been my first clue. The argument with the KEF LS50 is that it needs the right amplification. That if you don't have the right amplifier with it, then you're not going to get the most out of that speaker. I think that argument could be made for any and every speaker out there. But not any and every speaker has to have that argument because they already sound good. I found the KEF LS50s to be too forward and lacking any sort of bass. I didn't find them to sound natural at all. I compared them, it was one of my first videos I did. I compared them to the RP600M and the ELAC debut reference. I ended up selling the KEF LS50 to finance more products to bring in for the channel. I agree here with Trevor, especially on the KEF LS50s. To be fair, I haven't heard any name equipment, any Martin Logan equipment. I do have a ton of experience with ELAC. The B6, that is going to be probably not a speaker for everyone. But what that speaker did was soundstage and image like nothing I'd ever heard before. And it also had so much bass presence. And that's probably what he's talking about is the bloat bass. There was another comment about another ELAC model, the B6.2, about that being overhyped and not very good. I agree. I own that speaker 3 times and I returned it 3 times. To be fair, they sent me a 5.2 by accident. So I had 6.2s twice and the 5.2s. I didn't like that speaker. I felt like it really deviated from the B6. It was too forward. I don't think it had enough bass. With the 6.2s, they swung the pendulum all the way to the other side. And it didn't have the magic that the original B6s had. Riga. I have 0 experience with Riga. High-end cables. I have a little bit of experience, but yeah, I think those are overpriced, overhyped. Audio-Technica headphones. I do have the M50. I think it's the one that everybody has. And yes, I think they're probably overhyped at the cost. For studio monitors, for doing podcasts and things like that, I think they're fine. I have not listened to those for music in years. Years. They do have some excitement on top, but for music, yeah, I think they're way overhyped. Matt K. Just 2 words. Triangle Boreas. The bros, as they're more commonly referred to. I couldn't agree more. I didn't like the Bro 3s. Let me take that back. It's not that I didn't like the Bro 3s. I just didn't think they were as good as other speakers, like the Klipsch RP600M or the ELAC debut reference, which I compared them directly to at the beginning of the channel when I bought them. Because nobody was sending me stuff. Nobody was sending me anything, so I bought everything. And what I heard was a lack of clarity on the Bro 3s. I think they looked good. I thought they were really overpriced. The irony is here that if you go and you try to look up a Triangle speaker, it is selling for significantly less than what it used to sell for, with inflation. So, I would say that the Triangle Bro 3s especially were overhyped. And not as good as some other speakers that were priced similarly. Now that they're less expensive, they actually might be a better value. But back then, no, not at all. Bro 3s were good, but definitely not great. Tyler Cheeseman coming in with a hot take. 2 items that fit this category that I'm guilty of purchasing due to hype. Denafrips Aries 2 and Sennheiser HD 650. All right, I gotta close the computer on this one. So the Denafrips Aries 2, I love. And it has been reviewed a lot. It's my favorite DAC. It really is. Through headphones, though, the Denafrips Aries 2 is not at its best. For me, the Denafrips Aries 2 is at its best when it's in a 2-channel system with speakers. Because it's soundstage, it's imaging, it's layering that I just don't hear when I'm on headphones. Because I have done a direct comparison between the Denafrips Aries 2, the Schit Bifrost 2, and the Topping something 90 SE. It was very expensive. Those DACs all came in at a similar price at the time. Actually, the Topping was the most expensive, and I thought the least impressive DAC out of the bunch. I did all that testing through headphones, though, and the similarities were pretty tight on headphones. However, when I put them on speakers, I could definitely start to hear the differences. And those differences were in spatial placement more than anything else. A little bit of reverb. I think there's a little bit of second order harmonics going on in the Denafrips Aries 2, not too dissimilar from a tube amplifier. Love Tyler Cheeseman. However, I'm going to disagree on the Denafrips Aries 2 because I love it. I think in certain applications, one is not going to hear the magic of the Denafrips Aries 2. He is only the second person, though, that I've talked to in my little group, my patron community, that hasn't liked it or has sold it. Most folks really, really like that DAC. As far as the HD 650, I don't really have any experience with that. I have experience with the 6XX from Sennheiser, and I think that's the same headphone or based on the same headphone. I like it. I mean, I don't do backflips over it. I think it's got great mid-range. But at the price, I think the 6XX is still a great buy. And I think even if you're not into that sound signature, because it's such a high value, it's something nice to have in the collection because it does give a different vibe, a different take on the music. So I do like the 6XX, but not necessarily for rock and roll. More acoustic, vocal-centric type of tracks. I think it's amazing. But if I'm rocking out to some Metallica, some Disturbed, it's probably not through the 6XX. Billy D. Gray says, I vote for more discussion on interconnect cables, speaker cables, power cables. Oh boy, oh boy. What a hornet's nest. This is probably the most divisive topic in all of audio, at least from my perspective. When I look at other channels, when I look at discussion, forums, things like that. There's a camp that says cables make a difference. And there's people that I trust that say cables make a difference. I believe them. There's people that say cables make zero difference. They have zero impact on the sound. I believe them. Really, whatever works for you. I personally choose cables from the world's best cables for interconnects. And they're RCA. I think they're made from Conair, wire, whatever it is. I use it really for cheap insurance. And it's not super cheap. They're about $30 a pair for RCAs. And that's about double what I would pay with Amazon Basics cables, which I use a lot of as well. But I use them because they're built better. And if there is any sonic improvement, you know, I'm willing to take that chance for $30. I haven't heard any magic cables in my experience. Actually, I got sent a pair of very good cables from one of my patrons. And they're very heavy duty. They're so heavy duty that they kind of tweak some of the connections on my receiver. I think some of these really heavy duty, expensive cables can actually cause harm. Not necessarily from a sonic perspective at all, but just from how beefy they are. I think it puts strain on my receiver. I'd rather just have a homemade pair of speaker cables that I made. In my patron community, the overwhelming thought process behind cables is that interconnects play more of a role in sound characteristic changes. Now, don't shoot the messenger here. I'm just telling you what they've told me. And I know I'll probably get some flack for this, but I have heard a difference in interconnect cables. I haven't done any crazy A/B tests, but I hooked up a pair of cables one time, and I don't even remember what they are. I think they were homemade cables that were sent in from one of my patrons. And I was like, oh, that sounds more clear. It sounds a little bit more airy. That's been my only experience with cable sonic differences. Now, that's purely anecdotal because I wasn't even doing an A/B test. I think there may be some merit to interconnect cables, XLRs, RCAs, but I'm not willing to put my name on it quite yet. So this was a lot of fun. If you want to support the channel, you can use my affiliate links in the description. You can sign up for Patreon. You can sign up for Amazon Music or Tidal Music. So don't binge watch anything on Netflix or Hulu. Binge listen and fill your soul with happiness. And with that, I'm Randy. I'm the Cheap Audio Man.